Thank you for joining us this morning for Artist Talks in the Garden. I am Beatrice Shen, the Senior Director at Hauser Wirth Los Angeles. We are so happy to have you for these two back-to-back Artist Talks on the occasion of our fall openings in downtown LA. In a few moments, we will dive into a discussion of Lee Lozano, and at 12:30, we will hear from artist Flora Yuknovich on her fantastic exhibition. So please save your seats and stay with us. First, it is a pleasure to have you all gathered here to celebrate Lee Lozano Hard Handshake, the largest survey of drawings in Los Angeles dedicated to this legendary artist. And I am thrilled to welcome you to our talk with an amazing lineup of speakers who will explore Lozano's bold artistic legacy and fascinating life. We are honored to have with us Paul McCarthy, a true LA legend and one of the most influential American artists working today. Paul's work across performance, film, sculpture, drawing, and painting is bitingly raw, often hauntingly humorous, and always deeply insightful. His oversized characters and objects hold up a mirror to Hollywood, politics, science, pop culture, revealing the chaos and contradictions behind the American dream. And fun fact, one of the works in our exhibition is actually on loan from Paul's own collection. Paul is joined by Tala Madani, another powerhouse LA-based artist whose sharp and unforgettable paintings and animations bring together a wide-ranging mode of critique exploring questions of gender, political authority, and who and what gets represented in art. Moderating today's conversation is Ingrid Schaffner, Hauser Wirth Senior Director, and thank you, Ingrid, for guiding us through what is sure to be a great discussion. In conjunction with this exhibition, Hard Handshake, Hauser Wirth Publishers has released in the studio, Lee Lozano, a new book focused on Lozano's life and work written by Lucrezia Visconti. This is an excellent resource for both newcomers and longtime admirers of Lozano's radical work. I hope you pick up a copy and visit Lozano's incredible exhibition if you haven't already. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Paul, Ingrid, and Tala.
Thank you, Beatrice. And thank you both. I can think of no better artists to speak about the art and legacy of Lee Lozano, especially because this is, in a sense, a continuation of, or let's say deepening, of a conversation that you two had in 2019 in Paul's studio, and which is published in this edition of Ursula Magazine, Volume 5, available in the kiosk next door. And it's a great read. The headlines for the article are Art, Fascism, and Feces. So picking up where you left off there, I think that we are in for some extreme insights into the work of Lee Lozano. Before we jump in, I want to say a few words about the handout that you were invited to pick up, and the recording that we were playing earlier as people were sitting down. So the recording was of a lecture that Lozano gave at the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design in 1971. The talk was called The Halifax Three-State Experiment, and it stretched over 8 hours and moved over multiple locations as Lozano herself moved into various states. So the first hour of the lecture, she speaks sober, then stoned on grass, and then high on LSD. The recording just covers the first hour. I'm not sure if the successive hours were actually recorded, but it's really, it's great to hear her public voice of this rather elusive artist. So the lecture coincided with an exhibition at Gstaad of Lozano's life art pieces, an example of which is reproduced on your handout, the General Strike piece of 1969, in which Lozano declares that she will gradually but determinedly avoid being present at art world events. This first art life piece marked the beginning of Lozano's gradual withdrawal from the New York art world, with the most seismic rupture being the Boycott Women piece of 1971, whereby she cut off all communication and interaction with women, a piece that she continued for the rest of her life. She realized the final work in the series, the final work in the Art Life series is the Dropout piece of 1972. She completely abandons the art system. She moves from New York to Texas, and there leads a rather reclusive life, not making art. It's important to say that she was working. She was reading, she was thinking, she was living. Lozano called Dropout Piece the hardest work I ever made. It occupied her for 27 years until her death in 1999. And on the other side of the handout is Lozano's annotated copy of the press release for her 1970 exhibition at the Whitney Museum of Art of the Wave series, which I think we'll be hearing more about. It was her last work before embarking on the life art pieces. So I think that's in a way, these 3 points, coordinates, kind of take us beyond where the point where the exhibition leads us on view. Okay, and I also want to introduce somebody very important to the exhibition here in the audience, Barry Rosen, who is the director of the Lee Lozano estate and who is responsible for the incredible installation now on view. So thank you, Barry. Okay, so now let's get on with it. We agreed to start with a very obvious question, which is, when or how did you first encounter Lee Lozano's work?
I think so, because we probably saw it first before I did.
You saw it first,
So
so
maybe
Paul,
chronologically we should.
It's kind of a little hard for me to figure out exactly when it was, sometime in the 80s. And I think what I knew about were the wrenches and the black screws. And there was a period where, kind of odd, I kind of got them confused with Judith Bernstein's screws. But then I kind of realized, because of the wrenches. So I knew of the wrenches. Mm-hmm. And I would guess it's middle 80s or something. And it was from a magazine. Mm-hmm. That's what you could see. It was difficult to see the actual work, even if you were in New York.
And it still is.
Yeah. So it was a magazine. Mm-hmm. And I was pretty interested in them.
That's interesting. I mean, I would actually be interested to know when else then, how did that come out? And then how else did you see more of her stuff after that?
Wow. I think, for me, I was interested in what those pieces were, the wrenches, because although they were like an Oldenburg, you could say, but in another way, they were not an Oldenburg. And the way they were confined within the rectangle, like they're very claustrophobic. They're squashed into the rectangle. And then they're phallic. And the subject of tools, male, phallic. And then what they are, it's a wrench, like you tighten it up. Yeah. Like it has like a potent energy. Same with the crowbar, the hammer you pound. These objects were particular and spoke of subjects I was interested in, the patriarchy and the male and the subject of the phallus. So then, after that, I kind of went on a hunt to try and find them.
Right.
I know that when I joined this gallery, I suggested that Lee Lozano, Kudo, and Gutai were the direction it should go in. But then the work sort of really didn't come up. It was difficult to see it for years. And for me, it didn't really happen until the PS1 show happened sometime, I guess it's 90s. Is that it? 90s? I don't know. And I remember seeing that. Anyway, that's it. And that's when I actually saw these types of drawings that are shown here. That's when I think I saw them. I don't think I saw them before. Can't remember, I think I would have remembered them, I guess,
I saw them first in 2010, and I was amazed that I had I've gone to undergrad and I've been to grad school, and no one had brought her up. And so seeing her, and it was just surprising, not that people should, but it was surprising that it hadn't come up when I was in grad school in the early 2000s. So I saw it in 2010 in a big show in Stockholm. I happened to be in Stockholm seeing the Moderna Museum, and they had a great show of her work in the museum. And the wave paintings were installed with the velvet behind them, and I was just shocked. I mean, talk about energy.
Can you describe the wave paintings a little for the...
The wave paintings are these very physically, almost figure-size, vertical pieces. And she wants them installed in a sort of a rhythmic way to each other in front of a velvet fabric that is, the black of that velvet would be textured. And they're done in a way that, makes you not think of the hand. So they're done in a very overall way, and they're very precise, and they're very physical, very textured, and the color in them is just light passages going through these, however she's done them with these, effects. And so what she would do is also she would have some kind of a mathematical equation of how to do it, and they would be done in one go. And they would get more complicated. So maybe the first one would take her however many hours, and the last one she took her supposedly 3 days, not without any stop. So they were also physically, an exertion. But their precision, and so you'll see some of the drawings, the preparatory drawings in the show right now for them, they're markedly very different than her other drawings in the first gallery. And so she's having very precise plans of what she will go into for a few hours and
Or days.
Or days. And so they're performative, and as well as wanting to really give this object an experience that it can hold all of her energy within this experience. And then obviously the black curtain, it makes them very theatrical. It makes them really stand out, almost like on a stage or on a different plane. Yeah, we can talk more about it later. Yeah, but that was the first time, and then, like you said, then I went for a hunt. Then after that, I wanted to see more, and then to see that, this is just one iteration of her expression. She's done this figurative stuff, the joke stuff, the performance stuff. It becomes ever more, some artists, it's very interesting to me what happens when you encounter an artist that you like and the evolution of one's experience with that artist over decades. You can go, oh, and oh, and ah. With her, it's more like, oh, and yes again, and more. It's the crescendoing. The more you experience it, the more I was going to perform all that, but I thought maybe not. It becomes, it adds. It never takes away. And I feel like her paintings and her drawings already have that agitation that then she expresses in her performance pieces, and that energy, but we'll talk more about that in a second, but yeah.
So it's interesting, Paul, you came to the work through the figurative works, and you came through the abstract, more minimalist works. Yeah. And if you have the Whitney press release, she describes the wave painting she was making representing the electromagnetic scale, and she has a little chart at the bottom, just exactly what you said about this kind of the precision of what they are. And when she showed the works at the Whitney for the first time, she specified that they be hung high on the wall, she said, because I was high when I painted them, and I brought LSD into the museum. So let's jump to the Dropout piece, which is just, it is a sublimely radically sublime work of art. The artist and activist who was one of Lee's peers and champions, Lucy Lepard, said that what other conceptual artists were talking about doing, thinking about doing, Lee did. And I wonder, in the sort of extremity of this gesture, this work, this piece, is there something kind of terrifying in this provocation of this work for you as artists? How do you think about the Dropout piece?
Sounds great.
Well, don't drop out just yet.
I think for me it's interesting, yes, their direction from the wrenches to the abstract paintings, and then and like I said, the wrenches being claustrophobic, and then you get to the abstractions, and when I did see the abstractions, that's what they're referred to, they really did affect me in ways that a lot of abstraction doesn't. In that there was something that was really anxious about them. And again, claustrophobic. They fill the whole thing, and the angles, and still in a kind of anxiety that is reminiscent maybe of this. When you think of her work in relationship to the patriarch or the male-dominant art world, and the fact that very early on in 58, 60, she begins to make these gestures within these comic or whatever they're, the dirty drawings as they're referred to, which is so stupid. But there's something about the comic and those drawings and what they're about and how, and then the abstractions going to these, points like that, and there's just a trajectory that makes sense, right? And I think there's something where she's trying the wrenches create energy, and those abstractions they're really energy driven and emotional. Like I think they're not like a Rothko. It's another tension, right? And a tension that she feels, right? And then it goes to Dropout, but it's a build through those language pieces, right? And I think that, with the language pieces, it seems like she writes a recipe, it's a text. And that's the only thing the viewer gets, right? It's not documented. It's not like the performance that is videotaped or photographed. There's no documentation, only the text. And it's a kind of recipe. And then she carries it out, right? She does it. Or maybe some of them are written on some after and stuff like that. She continues to write on them to kind of change it. But I think it's like a recipe, and then she has to endure it. So in a way, everybody says, well, she left the art world. Well, the answer is, yeah, she left the art world, but did she leave art? So, and why did she really leave the art world? And what was that? And I think it's a lot about, she talks about competition. And I think in a lot of ways, galleries create competition, or the art market creates competition within artists, right? But she's pointing at this thing of the competition of her peers. Then she's a woman in a male-dominant art world. And so there's something about the rejection of the art world, but not necessarily the rejection of art. And at that point, she's accepted art as life.
And energy.
Yeah, she's like, it's the art and life, and the art and life. And it's a very early, sure, you have Capro in the 50s and stuff like that. But she turns, it's a kind of performative, it's a performative work, it's a performance, but not in the sense of using the word performance. It's a life thing where she's affecting her own life, and it's the thing of affecting herself. And so when she says it's the hardest work I've ever done, she's saying I did it for 28 years, or I didn't speak to women for 28 years. It's a powerful piece. Like it can't be seen as, the art world wants to see it. Oh, she cracked up. She left. She went out of the art world. And you're thinking, dude, it's radical. And, she talks about radicality as not just in art, but radicality in yourself and in culture. Until that happens, what are we talking about? So it's, her work ended when she died. It didn't end when she dropped out.
No.
And what she did then, it's like, who knows? And I think the other subject is the subject of experiment and science. Like she's created an experiment also, like what's it gonna do? What do I get from this? What happens to me, you know? And I mean, I think the lecture at Nova Scotia, the marijuana, the LSD, 8 hours, that's a performance.
And an experiment.
And an experiment, yeah.
The feeling or thinking about dropout is really interesting. You can do it in so many ways. I mean, when you read about also her writings about the hammer pieces, for example, is that she, and the way she paints them, right, they don't adhere to gravitational forces. This big iron thing is changing, and so they're already involved with wanting to transform something. And her paintings, so what does she do? She masters technicality of painting, and then she turns it into something she can use. So she turns it into her own language. And then she wants to talk about transformation in that same language. So what I'm trying to get to is, I think with all of these phases of her output, that the concern has very similar, there's like the foresight is very shared and similar between a lot of them, where she, the hammer is supposed to destroy everything and then also to be used to rebuild everything. So she's thinking about rebuilding the art world, rebuilding our own consciousness about how we see things. And so the other part of it, I think, we can talk about artists in terms of who they were next to and how their work resonates within that community of who they were with and how should we talk about this person. But also, I think, in a way that philosophers are talked about, are not so much about who else was around, but how do they link up from generation to generation? Like how Schopenhauer affects Nietzsche, what's the line of connection as opposed to who's in that circle? And I think with Lozano, for me, that's really interesting, of her use value, her insane contribution to what and how we should think about the problem moment we find ourselves in, both globally and within the art world, in a microcosm of what is happening. Because she has a lot of answers already for the sort of consuming of culture by capital. And so her rejection of all that and how she holds a standard for art that is beyond any scene or any sort of experience that that can deteriorate from that art experience. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're talking about is her standard of what art making can be for herself and for an audience.
It's funny you say audience, because Paul, when you were talking, I was thinking one thing that she seems to reject is the idea that there's an audience. And in the Halifax lecture, she refers a lot to her friendships with mathematicians, to whom she seems to be feel more kindred than artists. And, well, not kindred with artists, but maybe a science world she's relating to more strongly than to an art world. And she says, well, scientists, mathematicians, when they have an idea, they share it amongst each other and they publish each other's work. And then in the art world, as Paul said, she was very aggravated by the competitive nature of the art world and how the gallery system makes artists competitive with one another and competitive with themselves. And sort of by extension, she saw art world success with great ambivalence, even hostility. She spelled success S-U-C-K-E-S-S. And the work then begs the question of how how are you in a system at the same time you're critiquing and rejecting it? Because the work is art. It lands in our art world.
I mean, I was thinking about that statement about the mathematicians and the scientists, but they're pretty competitive too.
Oh, yeah,
Ego
no,
is
I think it's,
everywhere.
ego. The grass is always greener on the
Yeah.
other side of the
And
discipline.
they're competing for the
Yeah.
money and prestige, the same as the artists. And I think it could very well be. Yeah, I think she's, look, it's the 50s and the 60s in the art world, and it's pretty male-dominated at that point. So she's up against something, and she's aware of it. And, and then also I don't know whether all, like she sees competition, and maybe that's the pocket she's in, right? Like I've been in periods of time in the art world where I didn't feel the competition, and I felt like artists were trying to show each other and sharing. So I think it's like, like who's she hanging out with really, right? How did all that go down? And like, I have a different experience. There's another, the experience can change over time. You can all of a sudden be in a situation that really seems pretty aggressive. But there's that. The one thing I was thinking about the dropout piece, at that time, I think it's a very particular how she did it. Like, she makes a statement, and I think, like, she wrote these things down to be seen, right? Like knowing they could be seen, I guess. I mean, they still had to be picked up by somebody to show. I mean, how did we end up with the little books? How did we end up with the catalogs on Lee Lozano? Something had to have happened after she sort of leaves the scene. But it was. People did recognize her work, but I think...
The art life pieces were exhibited as conceptual
Yeah,
type
they're
artworks,
yeah,
even
so
in
they're
their
visible.
day. Yeah,
And
yeah,
she
yeah,
they're done that way.
Yeah.
They're done. You read them. You can read them. You can actually use them. I mean, like you can you can see them as something you can do if you want, right? But I also think the dropout. Artists do. There is a history of artists making a point of dropping out of the system, right? I think hers is very particular because of how she wrote it down and how she made a statement. I mean, there's other ones, they just fade away, but it's intentional, they just get out. And then there's some who, they exist in, especially at that period of time, the idea, the whole subject of performance and conceptualism, and especially with Fluxus, it's against the market. So this subject existed, right? Like the subject of going against the art world, the market, and making work in life, and art being something that affected you, and by affecting you, you affected the outside, right, in some way. And so there were artists who I had a friend, he left the art world and became a paleontologist as a work of art, right? And I think that, I think it's important to say, like when I asked him why it was a work of art, he said, because you have to stand up and walk and look at the ground. You have to be aware or imagine a landscape that is no longer there, and geological time is incomprehensible. Those are three really interesting views and why he saw it as sculpture. And when I asked him, well, what's it like with the other paleontologists? Are they interested? And the answer was no. And I think the problem there is he left a community that was interested in those things. And so to leave that is something, right? To leave and go out of the art world completely, out of your friends, out of the people who think this way or are interested in what the fuck is life and what are we? I mean, it's very existential, her situation. And the subject of science and looking at the cosmos and looking at mathematics. That also was a subject that was very prevalent with a lot of artists in that period of science and the equating of science and art as a joinery, you know. So these are things I think she's aware of, and it's not completely in isolation. I guess. I mean, I wasn't in her head, so I don't know. It's a possibility.
Besides competition, though, I think the other thing was that she has such a standard. There's like a whole story about how she took herself out of a 3-person show, and then she wrote in her notebook that she doesn't want to hang with anyone that's going to bring her down. So she's also not just feeling competitive, but feeling like she holds herself to a certain standard, and if she's not seeing that matched within the environment, she also would rather be somewhere else and not bring herself down. You know, people sometimes are too sensitive to turn a blind eye and get affected by what's around, you know, and it does, if you have to sum up that energy to make something that powerful, and then you're faced with mediocrity continuously, you want to protect yourself against that. Otherwise, it keeps taking your energy away. So that's another reason, and not just necessarily saying, you know, so that's, I think, part of her thinking as well. The paleontology thing was great, Paul, I think, because she is also quoted in another book with the cave drawings about how the only reason we have cave drawings is because they use them as toilets. I'm paraphrasing. But it's great that she, right, this is in the 60s, that she's thinking that humorously about all the possibilities of mark making. And we were talking with Nathaniel, my husband, about how interesting it is also that there is so much unknown about the cave paintings, about how and why, and also about Lozano. That's also apt to think that there's a lot of projections there.
So I'm going to stick with the cave painting bathroom graffiti. So Lozano, we're going to talk about shit. She refers to the body as an elaborate container, and when you're looking at the wall of drawings, there's a sort of theme in the work of these sort of cartoonish-looking boxes that are full of body parts and fingernail clippings and often pieces of shit. And so, these works, of course, are part of this sort of bigger, sort of polymorphous sexuality of the work. It's pornography and humor. And Tala, one of my favorite works of yours is an animation where a woman is ostensibly cleaning her house, and the rag is covered with shit. And ultimately, she's obliterated in a storm of shit making. And Paul, we have here on permanent view here at the gallery one of your, let's say, the sweeter examples of your shit-related works in the men's and women's bathrooms is Paul's chocolate Santa butt plug wallpaper. So so let's talk about shit and transgression and humor. Maybe your shit relative to Lozano's shit is shit.
That's great. It's shit. We can do a collective experiment here. It's interesting. I mean, with Lozano, if I think about Lozano, I don't necessarily think about shit per se. I think about body parts for sure, the phallic, the penis, the joke. But I think about light. I mean, funnily enough, instead of shit, I think so much about the way she makes light happen. Oh, just so behind all of those objects that she paints, whether it's the head or the object, she just puts some light behind it, which just wants you to just go to it. So, but shit or all the other ways that she transgresses is her way of, I definitely think she's thinking about an audience, or she believes there is an audience, because there's no transgression without an audience, right? So I don't know how to talk about Lozano's shit per se, but for me, shit's the opposite of whatever we need in terms of perfection. I mean, for me, shit is not shit. Shit is freedom. Shit's like the thing that will actually be. So if I don't know if this is going to go well, but some people, you think the way they present themselves is as if they never have dirty socks, like as if their socks never and so it's sort of antithetical to that energy of like accepting that everyone has to wash their socks, or shit, whatever. So it's about allowing for freedom, allowing for malleability, allowing for there not to be a strict silhouette. Why are we still in silhouettes, the predefined silhouettes? So shit's malleable. It works for me in a way. Yeah, Paul, please. Paul made the butt plug. So there's.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, in some ways with Lee Lozano, I don't know. Yeah, shit appears within some, as I recall it, does it? How often does it? It's in the drawings, it's there. So is really like one of the major subjects that is the castration of the phallic, right? And I think, or the body parts removed, put in a box. And I think it's interesting, the body parts go in a box. The box is a container, but a house, whatever. And then those pipe wrenches shoved within the frame of the box of the painting, squashed in, right? And like a body part in a box, right? And that's like the transition from the comic drawings of body parts, penises, tits, whatever, all within boxes. And then she goes to the plumbing. The pipe wrenches are just body parts in a sense. And I think the subject of those drawings, and you could look at the early drawings in the same way as you look at shit. It's a form of putting something in somebody's face, right? Is it a provocative image? I mean, I think, like I've used shit a lot, and I think that people kind of want to look at it as, oh, you're trying to provoke me. But yet it's a liquid, it's a substance that's reminiscent of paint. And that's there too, right? And, but, this is separate maybe from her. I don't know whether that's how she viewed shit. I don't think it was like, oh, it's a material like paint. I do, right? So there's a difference there. And then I think also, shit, I think something like, you can either look at it as an anal fixation that you never grew out of, or you can look at it as a substance that really offends the habitual standards of normality. We're in a habit, all this stuff, and shit really does something there, And same with the subject of sex. I mean, she's just taking the blanket off of stuff, right? And I don't know how critical shit is to her work. It's there, but it's, I think, transgression and the phallic, and the phallic being related to men and the violence of men,
So we were talking, when we were looking at the drawings, about this kind of counterculture context that she's part of in the 60s, and underground comics, and the underground comics rife with pornography and political satire and sex and drugs, and so there's that context for the work as well. But we're going to wind down here before we take some questions, and I like that you kept bringing it back to energy and light. So Lee Lozano, she was born on November 5th, 1930, at approximately 4:25 p.m. in Newark, New Jersey. And she said she always said that was her true name, November 5th, 1930, 4:25 p.m., because it took her parents 3 days to name her. Leonore Knaster was her birth name. She changed her name to Lee at the age of 13, already kind of re-identifying herself. She marries an architect, Mr. Lozano, takes his name. They're married briefly. And she is kind of continuously changing her name, paring it down ultimately, so she goes from Lee Lozano to Leafer, kind of like Reefer Lozano for a period. Then she's Lee Free, and then EE, and then just E for energy. So again, this sort of movement that you feel from the figuration to the abstraction, there's something there, an energy that then is carried through in the life art pieces. And so maybe by way of conclusion here, is there something we haven't touched on that you want to say? And I also would point to like the here and now-ness of this exhibition. I feel like we're in a very powerful triangle right now here with the Monuments exhibition at MoCA, an incredible exhibition at the Box right now, and America, that has work by Lee and you, sorry. That's looking at the sort of politically catastrophic moment that we're in, and if we plug Lee Lozano into that, how might that complete the triangle?
Well, I think it's about expectations that we have of ourselves, right? We're in a very precarious, very kind of, you know what you said about at the time that Lee Lozano was doing these performances, many people were thinking them, but she did it. Now, we all think a lot of the same things, but we don't, we don't necessarily, put our money where our mouth is. Terrible money. But so I think if, when I used to teach, I would say to students, if you like something, you don't mimic it. You understand what it's doing, and you do that. So if it's like the Dadaist that you like, you don't start making work that looks like the Dadaists. You actually understand what they were trying to do, and you understand the sort of the structure of that, and that's what you're responding to, not the visual things. So what Lee is doing is, I think, if we can just increase the expectations of what we want art to do, and to understand what it is that, she's someone who's really amazing at able to push away cliches and the kitsch, and to really invent something with the tools that she has, right? So she's really able to. So what can we do in her spirit? In the spirit of guts, and to save ourselves from the moment that we find ourselves is interesting. And I don't know I guess I also feel I think about Duchamp, I think about Lozano. I think in my head I'm like, what would happen if Picasso had seen these paintings in the 50s, 60s? He would have fallen in love with her, and maybe this time it would have been him that would have been influenced by the painter as opposed to most of his partners. I just think about her power of her mark, and how, like I said, this kind of points of jumps of the artists that connect to each other. We can ask.
When you brought up Duchamp, I remembered a quote by Duchamp, and that's that the artists of the future will go underground.
Right.
And which is an interesting quote, implying you maybe go underground, but underground from the politics, or underground to be secluded. Duchamp, in a way, separates himself from the art world and continues to make work in private, right? I think I was sort of saying, it isn't that other artists weren't thinking about the art world and how they would exist in the art world. I think artists were, and some did, in a way, go into life. I think a lot of, in Los Angeles, at the end of the I would say maybe towards the end of the 70s, that thought, the idea of having a gallery was not a prime thought with a lot of artists. And the subject of art and life, especially within the women's movement, was really present. Like, I think the idea of art, your life as art, or working outside of the art system, right? And the gallery system, the museum system, right? I think that's one of the issues right now is especially with what's going on either politically or with technology, the question of what is the future of this system and who dictates it? Do the artists dictate it? Do the collectors dictate it? Who dictates where art goes and what it is? And, the subject of somebody like Lee Lozano, you can't sell anything there after she leaves, right? So you can sell the paintings of the past, but you can't. You can show them, but what do you do with the work for the last, when she begins those text pieces and those live pieces? I think that's something to think about in terms of what art is today or what the direction of artists will take.
So it's her energy that's...
An ideology, yeah.
I feel like we're kind
Questions?
of, like we could be revving up for hour 2, but we're not. We're going to take 2 questions. Two? Maybe 3. And there's a roving mic. Priscilla. Oh. Here, may I just give you the mic? Thank you.
And then,
Hi, thanks for being here. Could y'all talk about how Lozano's inspired pieces of your work?
I mean, for me, it's not. I would never think. She inspires a state of mind. She inspires a state of mind, right? Like to think, to like she argues for freedom. She argues for not being conventional. She argues for pushing yourself. So it's not about one piece, but if you stay with her, if you sit with her, if you read her work, if you look at her work, she is inspiring by her defiance or her ambition of what the work could do if you allow it, what is possible in art. So it's like her whole thing is inspiring, of course, yeah.
I think for me, I gravitated towards what I saw. And I think once I saw the comic drawings that are there, back there, that was really interesting for me because it reconfirmed what I believed. And just knowing, wow, they were made in 1960, right? I don't know of another body of work that looks like that made in 1960 or 1958 or 1962. I don't know. I mean, there's John L. Toon, slightly different. Gunter Bruce, 65, 66. The fact that she made that type, and you could say cartoons, and somebody said Crumb. Crumb's not till later. It's not till 64 or 5. I don't, maybe somebody knows. But for me, that kind of gesture at that moment, kind of amazing, like, oh, wow, crazy. So I think in a way, who she was and how she made work, and how she did it when she did it, even the decision to drop out, these are really kind of astounding moves by an artist, right? Like you could say genius.
Okay, next question. Thank you. Good question.
Is this on? So I have a question, and maybe this has already been covered in some part, but about the contemporaneous discussions of silence, and during her the early '60s, mid '60s, with reference to her gradual withdrawal from the professional art museum world, and also, I would say, a progressive dive into the interiority of words and language, and what you, Tala and Paul, might have to amplify that. Because I think it's a very critical part of her entire oeuvre, if you will.
One part of that, I think, I have a distinction between the language pieces, seeing them as the subject. And I think the subject is the activity or the action that she carries out. And the languages are written in a very simple, recipe. But I think it's really interesting to me that she hand wrote them, most of them. Maybe she'd go back and type some, but the handwriting, that's always, when you think that most of the male artists that were doing the same, a lot of it was typed. It's a weird distinction, but not sure it's critical, but I think the emphasis always goes to the language pieces. I think it's not the language pieces, it's the activity, action pieces that's critical. She carries that out. She does what she's going to do, whether it's,
I really do think she is questioning the language itself and its relationship to the thought and interiority, the interior with the exterior. Interior thought and the mechanics of that, or magnetic mechanics of that, and the exterior, the action. So, and I think that's sort of critical, and I think it's sort of critical to the moment that we're in right now. Mm-hmm. So, Tala, did you have some thoughts about that?
You mentioned the silence piece, and I think, do you mean the boycotting of talking to women silence piece? And the withdrawal piece, and we didn't talk about that much. So for me, that piece is really what, because some people find it quite offensive. Some women find it quite offensive because of how they think about it. For me, it becomes, you're most critical of the one that you care about the most. So the criticality is heightened. This is probably not PC, but kids will get more mad at their mothers than their fathers, if there's abuse, right? So, with that is when it's so provocative. If I think about not to talk to women, it becomes who else doesn't talk to women? What are women doing when they're not being talked to? How will you go about it? So it's not really. I don't focus my thinking around her action, but the ramifications of what that entails. When someone's not talking to a woman, what does that mean? So that's a really powerful piece to me, and it's, yeah. I could have just sat here and cried as a performance of what I think about Lozano's work and this power. I didn't.
I'm glad you did. I'm so glad.
But it's that it could envelop me in that way, and I'm sure many of you too. I can feel it. I can see it in your heads. Yeah.
Should we take one more question? I see a raised hand there. Priscilla.
Yeah, I just had a question about how you guys think in regards to the absurd. That you guys mentioned Duchamp, because I do see Duchamp being a sort of an artist who, we understand Dada as working with the absurd, but that really was a reaction also to the increasing fascism of the time. And then I think later on in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, with the sort of implosion of leftist groups, of the CIA espionage into groups, again, we see arguably with Nixon, Reagan, the sort of second rise of fascism in the US, and then now we kind of are facing another turnkey moment. And I just am curious how you guys think, as you guys have sort of seen and produced work that works within the absurd as a tool to sort of reflect socio-political times, and how does that, what role does the absurd take again as we are facing another moment, you know, similar to those peers I just mentioned?
Okay, I think the absurd I don't want to put I'm going to try not to put any words into her mouth or whatever, but just the absurd to me is the normality and what we view of society in the world, the constructions that the consumer culture's creating are absurd. So the absurd exists on the outside, and I think as an artist, is she illustrating the absurd? Is she? That's a question. Maybe it can be seen in the absurdity of men, you know. The power structures, I think that's in those pieces, especially the earlier pieces. And yeah, so there's, I mean, that's how I see her work. Are you asking a question about how absurdity is dealt with now? I think it's the same. We live in an absurd world.
I mean, I think I could sit with that, Paul, and think about that for a long time, because what is happening is, so what are we doing? We have these conventions of art making, and then we think if we go around it, that we're doing something absurd. But the truth is, what Paul's saying is, what is this the bigger forces are doing around us, and that why are we thinking about those? That's quite something to sit with in terms of how we use our calibrators, how we judge or how do we read things. I mean, if you think about absurd as humor, if you're thinking about humor as absurd, though, or absurd as kind of humor, I think for me that's so culturally specific, and that's also very interesting. And for me, because that could be a whole hour-long discussion. So in a really quick way, I would just say I hope that we don't scare away from being offensive. Because if you're so careful into like, you're not moving, and you have to trust the instinct to that. I mean, hopefully that you don't, and then so just go for it and make something that can land in a good place, even if throughout of it is a bit edgy on sides. I feel there's a generational. There's fear that's so embedded in, I don't want to do the wrong thing, so I do nothing. And that's the death, right? And that's the absurd world telling you, be afraid. You might do the wrong thing. And so that's the thing you have to fight against. So much. Yeah.
Back with the energy. Okay, this really is the last, you said there was,
I think.
okay, this is the last question.
Should we give that? Mike.
Kim? Was it you?
Yeah. Yeah. We can share.
Well, it just came to my attention recently from Tala, actually. She talks about dating fucking Dan Graham in her notebook. And I was just wondering if that was just news to me. And I was just curious if anybody knows more about that. And also, like, because she was, 20, you said 20 years older than him. Than Dan, and you know how she might have influenced him. I mean, we can all suppose in different ways, like sensitizing him to women in a certain way, as he, later went on and wrote about feminism and the voice and punk and things like that, which feminists would probably criticize him for. But I don't know, I was just curious if anybody knows anything more about that.
I think she was 13 years older.
Oh, okay, that makes maybe more sense. Yeah.
Who knows?
Who's
Somebody
counting?
knows. The photograph's great.
There's a photograph of the two of them in the chronology in
great.
snow, which is great. There are wonderful excerpts of them in her notebooks. So they're so explicit.
Say what the notebooks are, these private.
The private notebooks, I don't know what number it is. Maybe it's number 6, maybe it's number, I don't know. Read all of them. Could you please?
They were published in facsimile.
They're published in facsimile. They're on the table.
Karma published them, right?
Karma published them, all of them. Yeah, yeah. I've been asking around Kim about this,
Kim?
and not just in general about her, but yeah, and no one knows yet. But this is also the problem of when. Well, actually, maybe I can mention this. I mean, if it hadn't been for Barry taking the works, and if it hadn't been for Paul bringing the works to Hauser,
Oh, I didn't do that.
well, suggesting to
suggested.
Hauser, suggesting.
That happened because of Barry.
Barry.
Because they showed,
Yes.
because the work was that.
We couldn't experience it as an audience. We couldn't, and there wouldn't have been all this support and giving and finally finding people who still can tell the stories. So that's a lot. That's a whole artist that could have gone, and none of us would have benefited had it not been for this incredible situation that Barry created. So as an audience of Lee's work, I have to say thank you. Yeah, in a really sincere way.
And as the moderator, I'm going to say thank you again, Barry. And thank you, Paul and Tala. Give it up. That was great.